Testing, testing. What's up, everyone? Thank you for joining us. Sorry for being about 8 minutes behind schedule. We had some IT issues, but we are good now. Hopefully, everything looks good. Let's get the annoying bit out of the way real quick. Here's my vocals. How am I sounding? Here's some guitar. Hopefully that all sounds leveled and such. But hey guys, how's it going? Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are tuning in from today. So today we are going to be checking out PodGo. We've been talking about Helix a whole bunch, especially with the new 3.5 update, which has all the new cool cabs and such. But I thought it'd be cool to talk about PodGo. Not sure if any of the other product specialists have brought up anything with PodGo recently. So I thought it would be cool to just kind of go in and, for the placeholder today, I was thinking, I'm just going to build a preset, using my go-tos, using my most favorite blocks. And, it's really just kind of a copy and paste from, my favorite artists. You got guys, some of my favorites, Eddie Van Halen, Randy Rhoads, right? But with the stuff I'm going to be using today, let's take a look right here. This is my PodGo edit. So I'm just going to be building off of this today. But I have my PodGo, obviously, with the cam here. So if anyone had any questions on how to do something on the hardware side or the software side, we are ready to go on that front. So pretty much what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select, a new preset and build the preset we were just looking at from scratch, just kind of show you my reasonings on how to do stuff. And even though, I'm building, one of my favorite kind of presets with my favorite blocks, this is just a placeholder. So we can, just start talking shop, and any questions you have, we'll be more than happy to just dive on in. Looks like we have Tony Campanovo here in the chat on YouTube at least. So I'll do my best to answer any questions you have. And so enough of me talking. Let's just dive on in to what we got going on here. So I'm just going to move this guy about right there because I think my little name right there kind of blocks it. Cool. All right. So taking a look here, guys, I like to start off, as using the amp model. And so by default, we have this beautiful US double norm. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my favorite amp model, and that would be the Brit Plexi Bright, this white Tolex model we have here. And so, of course, with PodGo, you get a perfectly matched cab to whatever amp you choose. But since, we're doing my favorites today, I'm someone, when I build tones, I just like to get the tone and, hit the ground running, right? So what helps me get there, is using impulse responses. So I'm actually going to be using a line 6 created impulse response. So if there's any of you out there who are new to impulse responses and maybe you want to dive in, but maybe you don't feel 100% comfortable spending money on an impulse response, well, just go to our website, line6.com/allure. And you can see here on the screen, ALLURE. This is what I'm going to be using today. So I'm just going to double click and select impulse responses. And I'm going to pull down the Brit Greenback. And so this is literally just a Marshall cab with a 25 watt greenback. And we see that 67. So that's telling me that there's a Neumann 67 in the mix. And let's just hear what we have, when we pull this up, what, the term I like to use. Let's hear how it sounds out of the box, right? So this is what we have. A nice mid-gain sound. So a nice crunch sound. And so where I like to start off is I like to start building stuff in the amp. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to raise the gain to about 9. And what's great about these amp models is the model defaults are done really well. Our sound design team just knows where to put these. They just know where to put these parameters to make the amp sound good. I'm just going to drop the mids down a bit, and I'm just going to bring up the low end to about 8. And then the treble and the presence, I'll probably just bring that around 7. You know, with my experience, you can even see my Marshall, my 78 JMP right here. Whenever I've been using a vintage Marshall, I tend to kind of match the treble and the presence, keep them around this same area. And, and with the true point-to-point modeling we have in Helix, I get literally the same sound I can get out of this Marshall here. And unfortunately, it's just collecting dust. But hey, I don't have to worry about tubes and such anymore. So anyways, that's what I'm going to do there. Leave the presence and the treble at around 6.5, 7. And now for those of us who may not know channel volume, this isn't going to affect the tone of my amp at all. This is literally just going to be, your channel volume. And so when you're doing preset leveling and such, this is the knob you're going to want to adjust to ensure your presets are the same level. Now, when we look at the master volume here, this is actually tied into the power amp, just like a traditional amp. And so I'm going to keep that at 10. If I bring it down a bit, you'll hear that the volume dropped a little, but the saturation dropped as well. And I could drop that down a bit as well. And you're going to notice the volume isn't dropping a whole bunch, but the saturation is. So bring that master volume back up to 10. So you notice the volume moves a little bit, but that saturation is really, really changing. Let's see what we have here. Why is, let's see, Nick Ventura, why, okay, so we're looking here, set to -18. I'm assuming you're talking about the impulse responses. So Nick here is asking, what do you set your IR level to? Why is auto set to -18? Well, that's a very good question. Now, this isn't a setting I did. This is actually the default for the IR block. Now, when you think of impulse responses, they are dot wave files. And these dot wave files are a lot louder than a stock cab or any cab model we do. And so since these wave files are so loud, it is a set default in PodGo, in Helix, that every impulse response is at -18 decibels. And as you can see, my levels sound fine. Of course, I could bring this down or bring it up because who knows, maybe you got an impulse response from someone and it's super loud or super quiet. But this has been a good rule of thumb, and our engineers definitely know what they're doing, because I could pull up any impulse response and it's just going to sound, it's just going to sound right on the money. So that's why you see a -18 there. That's not something I did. That's just something that is stock. And we roll with it. And I'm sure you could ask other Helix users or PodGo users as well, like, hey, do you move that level around with your impulse responses? And more often than not, no. The one time I would move this up or down is if I would be blending 2 impulse responses with 1 amp, let's say. So that's why that's there. But great question, Nick. Thank you so much for asking. But that's the reasoning there. So cool. Love the questions. Keep them coming, guys. Of course, we have Tony Camponovo, another Line 6 product specialist, in the chat, and he will be happy to help out. So I feel like I have a pretty good starting off point here. So a pretty good starting off point there. Now, when I build tones, I tend to go on more for the brown sound, if you will. So I'm going to raise the sag up to about 7. And this is going to give the amp a much looser and flubbier response. When you listen to vintage Marshalls, the Van Halen even, this is really noticeable. And I'm going to leave hum where it's at. Now, the ripple is a characteristic of the output transformer, and it just makes the amp have this kind of sound in this growling tone, especially when you're pushing the drive and the master volume. When you're pushing the master volume all the way up, you really hear this characteristic. Now, again, this is in the power amp. We call these field controls. You may not hear it. I'm sure you're not going to hear it on your end. Maybe you're watching on a computer or a cell phone. So you definitely won't hear this, but as the guitar player, you definitely feel it. But one thing you will hear is bias and bias excursion. So the bias is pretty much how hard your power amp is running. It's at default at 7. I like it there, so I'm going to keep it there. If I drop it, the amp is going to get colder, which means the amp isn't going to have as much gain. And if I turn it up, the amp is going to get some more gain because the power amp is cooking more. But I'm not going to get that dynamic kind of response that you get from a Class AB amplifier like a Marshall Plexi, what we're using today. So if I crank this up, I'm going to make this Marshall feel and sound more like a Vox, because a Vox is, a Class A amp. And, those are just at the power amp is at 100% all the time. It doesn't fluctuate. And, that's why, Marshalls and Voxes, coming out of nearly the same area, they sound completely different. But one thing I am going to adjust is the bias excursion. Now, I can't recall 100% of what's going on in the circuitry when we move this around, but if you crank up the bias X, you're going to start to notice more mid-range. It's going to make this amp sound, just a little tighter, or maybe a little looser in the low end, but the mid-range is really going to get emphasized. But what I like to do is I like to turn this down really low to about 1. And I do this for most of the amps I use. And what ends up happening is your low end gets super tight. And so now that I've made these adjustments, let's hear the sound that I have now. So I think I have a pretty cool sound going now. I can build off this, I can add to it, and I'll just be off to the races. So let's see here. No questions in the chat. Hey, so no news is good news. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some overdrive. Now, one thing about distortions and overdrive pedals, they sound great, but sometimes you can lose some of the low end when you use an overdrive, which is fine. But what I'm going after today is I'm going to use the LA2A studio compressor. Now, this studio compressor you would normally find obviously in a studio, and your amp would be run before it. And so, your microphone picking up your cabinet goes through your compression and whatever else, and you have this LA2A. Now, this LA2A works on everything: vocals, drums, bass guitar. This has been used for generations and generations. But when it comes to the whole modeling side of things, I find running it before your amp sounds really, really good. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to adjust the peak reduction. I like around 5.4. And so what that's going to do is it's not going to really reduce a lot of the low end and a lot of my emphasis on chords compared to, where it is, where it's set for the default. And then I'm going to raise the gain maybe about to 7. And then the final adjustment is this emphasis. So if you look up the parameters for an LA2A, it does a lot of compression with the frequency response that you're pushing into it. So if you go, too far down, you're going to be doing compression, with maybe more low end. If you go too high, you're going to be doing some compression on the high end. So I like to keep it at around 5 to 6, right in the middle, so that way it's pretty even. There's some who, love to turn it down all the way, and there's some who like to turn it up all the way. Of course, depending on the amp you're using, the guitar you're using, and your overall tone, this may move around. But for my style and what I'm doing today, I'm going to keep it around 5.5. So we're going to get a little bit of a volume jump, just a little bit, because we've added this compressor. But let's do a quick A-B here. So here's my Marshall again. Now let's turn on this LA2A. So as we can see, we're getting into some gainier territory here. I'm hearing a little bit of some fuzz from my guitar here. So I'm just going to turn on the noise gate, and 500 milliseconds of decay is good. So I think maybe around 77, we should be good. Not too bad. And what's great, even though I have this LA2A hooked up, I can still clean up, My volume knob's a little sensitive. Crank it up. So as you can see, even though we have this compression and a Marshall that's cooking, you could still turn down and, get some nice quiet chords. So moving on, we got our amp, we got some overdrive, let's add some reverb. So I'll just go over here and add one of my favorite reverbs. And I can't wait, hopefully soon we get that dynamic ambience in PodGo because it just sounds so good. But my go-to is the plate. Sometimes, I like the dynamic hall, the dynamic plate as well. But with the other stuff I'm going to add to this preset, I don't think I'm going to have enough DSP for this dynamic plate. So I'm just going to choose the dynamic, or just choose the plate. And then I'm going to roll the decay down to about 3. And I'll move the pre-delay to about 110. That way you just get that kind of bounce back. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the compressor off, keep the mix at maybe about 35. And let's see what we got here. And that's still pretty loud. So what I'll do is I could turn down the mix a bit. I could even crank up the high cut some more. And what that's going to do is it's just going to roll off some of that high-end reflections we're getting. And now I have a pretty nice reverb sound. Not bad. Not a bad sound. And what's cool with this setup, even if I bring in some overdrive with this compressor, it sounds really good still, even in single coil. Not a bad, really not too bad of a sound at all. So already we have this pretty dynamic preset. I just, we were in humbucker mode, we were in single coil mode, the bridge, the neck. So sometimes when you're using overdrives or distortion pedals, when you go from single coil to humbucker, you can get, when you're going from single coil to humbucker, you can get some weird nuances. And so I think it just works so well for almost any style you're using. So let's see what we have here. Let's take a look at the chat. Does the volume pedal change the distortion sound in any position? So right here from Orlando, does the volume pedal change the distortion sound in any position? Well, it all depends on where your volume pedal is set. So the volume pedal, if I have it set in the beginning of the signal chain, and we can look here, on my PodGo, I could bring the volume down. So right there, you can probably tell that my volume's dropped a little bit, but so has my gain. And when you have a volume pedal in front of the amp model, it's going to react just like the volume on your guitar. So what you're doing is you're cutting the signal going to the front of the amp. And as I bring this up, the gain is going to increase as well as the volume. Obviously, you know, just due to how volume pots on your guitar are compared to your, you know, volume pedal, you'll get a better, you'll be able to clean up better when you're using your guitar. So taking a look here, that's the volume pedal. If I drop it to, you know, gosh, let's say, you know, like 22%, trying to get it to, yeah, something like 6. So something like 6%, we've kind of cut our gain down. But if I move the volume pedal after the amp, and that's what's great about Pod Go, we can move this stuff anywhere, it's not going to control gain. It's just going to control volume. So listening here, we can see, or we can hear that my entire, actually, let's move this after the cab. We can hear all the gain, all the bells and whistles of my tone, but just the volume is lessened, not the gain. And then I can bring that up. So it all depends where your volume pedal is. So to recap, if it's in front of the amp, it controls gain. When it's after the amp, it controls just overall level. So it really depends where you want, you know, what you want to control when you're moving that around. Great question, Orlando. Thank you. What do we have here? I'm just clicking as I go. Bought a Helix LT around 2 months back. Loving the sound, but programming it is definitely a process coming from Line 6 Pod HD 500X. But for some reason, Helix doesn't transfer from my monitor. Oh, interesting. Well, hey, make sure if you have any questions there, monitor headphones to the live gig setup as easy. Oh, interesting, for sure. Well, you know, Ashan, you know, if maybe we have a video on our YouTube section, you could definitely check that out. Otherwise, make sure you hit up, if you have any concerns with setup or anything like that, again, there may be a video on it. And if there isn't a video, you can definitely hit up our customer service team. Check out on our website when they're available. And you have free support right there for any of your Line 6 products. So good stuff there. Thank you. And Orlando, thank you again. Much appreciated. So guys, I've added my reverb. So what I could add now is maybe a delay. And one of my favorite delays is the transistor tape delay. And whenever we're working with delays, of course, you have your milliseconds, but I could just hit this little note subdivision button right here. And now I have quarter note delay. And I'll drop the feedback down so I don't get too much clutter. And, you know, let's just see where we're at here. You know, I could turn this down a bit. Not a bad sound. I could turn up the feedback a bit, and I could go to, let's do like a dotted eighth. So now we could turn up the feedback a little bit, and you could have some, you know, some fun dotted eighth stuff here. I could crank up the mix a little bit. You know, we could do a different tap. So right here, I could just go in and tap in a different tempo. You know, it's kind of maybe even faster. You know, you could just have fun with that all day. So now we got that set, and as I'm doing this, if you look here in the editor, these little numbers, I don't know how well you can see them on your screen, but as I'm adding these, Pod Go is automatically assigning these effects to foot switches. Now I can move these around anytime, but that's just one step I don't have to do. But of course, we all like to customize our setup and have our foot switches in different areas. So at any time, if I want, you know, instead of it being on foot switch 4 and I want it on foot switch 6, I could literally just right click it, go to bypass assign, and then I could choose 6. And what's great is Pod Go, it's telling me here in the editor, what is assigned where. So I can just choose footswitch 6. And as I do that, now I have my reverb on footswitch 6. So that's how quick and easy you can assign and move stuff around in Pod Go. And so finally, we're in a situation where I have one more effect that I can add, and I could add nearly anything I'd like. I could always do kind of the best of both worlds here, where I can have a Minotaur, and so I can pick and choose what kind of overdrive I want. And we've been using this LA2A studio compressor, so let's hear the difference we get when we add a Minotaur. So what I could do here is I could turn this on and off from the foot switch, and then I have my that's my EQ. So here's what the LA2A studio compressor. Let's turn off that delay first. So that's with the studio compressor. Let's hear the Minotaur. So, they're both getting me there. They're both giving me that overdrive that I need, but they sound completely different. So, and lots of times I'll run both, not simultaneously, but I'll have both in my preset just in case, and especially if I'm doing covers and such, depending what group I'm with, one may be better than the next. And, I just think single coils cleaned up with the LA Studio compressor just sounds great. But before the amp, I could always add a modulation, and hey, we could always run a phase 90 here. And if you're ever running a phase, I think around 0.8 sounds the best. This is probably the one modulation that I won't match, where I won't do note subdivision. I just, for me, just with how this effect was designed, I feel like it doesn't sound natural. So I'll just use like a -8. And, with that, and you get that nice script mod face. You could do that all day. Yeah, great effect. Whether it's a chorus, modulation, you could add all sorts of stuff in there. And so that's my setup there, guys. A Brit Plexi Bright, a cabinet of your choice, this Allure 67 Brit greenback here. If this is the kind of Marshall sound you're going for, it does a superb job of delivering that sound. You may have noticed I didn't use the parametric EQ. This, of course, you could change this out to something more simple, like a simple EQ or just a low and high cut. For me, EQ is my last resort. If there's a frequency I just can't stand that I'm getting from an amp, I'll throw in a parametric EQ or, most of the time just a graphic EQ. But keep in mind, when you're using a cab, you have your low and your high cuts. So if my low end was a little too much, I can go here and roll off about 50 hertz. Now, you're probably not really going to hear that on your side of things, but this is where I start when it comes to just evening out the lows and the highs with my amp sound. I'll go to the cab and I'll check out the low and the high cut. And if there's still something shining through I'm not happy with, I'll go to the EQ. And for example, I'll just throw in a 10 band graphic EQ, and I'll just go to that frequency and drop it. If you really want to get in the weeds and, really sculpt your sound, go to the parametric EQ, because then you can specifically choose a frequency and choose how much of it is in your sound. And keep in mind, it's better to take away what you don't want than it is to add what you do want. So recap, Marshall Plexi into a greenback impulse response, some plate reverb, and ultimately the LA2A studio comp. That's really all I'm doing here. So whether you're using Helix or Pod Go, you can throw these items up. And again, if you don't have the impulse response, go on our website /Allure, just ALLURE, and you'll get all these impulse responses straight into your inbox. And then, hey, for all you know, you may really enjoy using those, and you can go into our web shop or marketplace, the Helix marketplace, and purchase your own impulse responses. But hey, with the new 3.5 update with Helix, I don't even use impulse responses anymore when I'm using Helix, just because that cab modeling is just eons from where we started. So hooray to technology, right? Because we were able to get such killer sounding impulse responses there. So before I head out, looks like we're at 11:38, so that's my half-hour cue. Let's take a look at the questions we have coming in the chats here. Let's see here. Boom. My distortion tones do not sound good through headphones. Clean effects sound good, but distortions do not. And I can totally agree with that. Your tones are always going to sound different through headphones. And the thing about headphones is, unless you have a really nice, even expensive pair of studio headphones that are just flat, full range, flat response, right? They're designed to listen to music, mastered, ready to go music. So tones could sound a little funky in headphones. To be honest, no one from myself, the product specialist, and at Line 6, I doubt anyone is creating presets on headphones. It's great to have headphones so you can jam and practice and move stuff around and stuff in a situation when you have to be quiet. But you can go through 5, 6, 10 different pairs of headphones, and each ones are going to sound different. So that's just the nature of the beast with headphones. That's why when you think about it, guitar players we have all been so conscientious on the amps or on the speaker cabinets and the speakers that we're using. So when you take that and now you're listening through headphones, you're going to get a different reaction. So just keep that in mind. It really, the better the speaker source or the cabinet you have, the better your sound is going to be. That it's just the nature of the beast, right? And plus, when you're wearing headphones, they're headphones. There's no air to move, and when you're a guitar player, you expect to hear an amp in the room kind of a sound where you feel the vibration, you feel and you hear the air move. You're not really going to get that with headphones. Now, when you listen to music through headphones, you're listening to music that was mastered, it was recorded, it was mixed, it was EQ'd. So you could listen to that song on almost anything. But I'll tell you what, listening to that same song in headphones compared to a nice big sound system, completely different experience. So keep that in mind. I've learned that we just experiment mix and match amps cabs till we find something perfect. Ashan, thank you so much for chiming in there. Much appreciated. Question I have is, can we use a stock cab and an IR in the same preset? Now, if we are talking about a Helix product, the answer is yes. With Pod Go, you have these pre-fixed blocks. And so we only have the ability to use one cab at a time. But if I was using HX Stomp, Helix Floor, Helix LT, we would be able to do that no problem. You can use 2 impulse responses simultaneously. You could use a stock cab and an impulse, whatever it may be. But yes, you can definitely do that with Helix, but not with Pod Go. So I used to get great headphone tone on my Pod 2.0, so not sure why HX Stomp and Pod Go do not sound good on the headphones. I'm really not sure. Definitely the modeling is different. Between the two, Pod 2.0, that's going pretty far back. So I'm not sure why that would be. The thing is with the modeling in Helix, the modeling in Pod Go, which is the same modeling, there's a lot more information. There's a lot more data with the amp models in HX modeling. So you're probably hearing a lot of the higher end frequencies and other frequencies from HX modeling that you're not getting from your Pod 2.0. That's Pod 2.0. We're going back, 20 years or so, right? Or not as much, at least 15 or so, 15, 17 years. So the modeling is vastly different. And so that's why I feel you may be hearing frequencies with the HX modeling that you're just not hearing with Pod 2.0. And so those frequencies may sound harsh. I'm assuming, maybe the tones sound thin, or maybe they sound brittle through your headphones. And, and that's because that information is there with our modeling here. But with that in mind, maybe you could throw up an EQ. And are you my long lost brother? But yeah, maybe you can throw up an EQ or use a global EQ on either Podgo or Helix. So when you are using headphones, you can kind of match the tone and the experience you're having with your headphones compared to if you're using studio monitors or a full range flat response speaker. That just may be something you have to do. And if you can, and if you can ensure, like if you're using the same headphones on your Pod 2.0 in the same ones with your Helix, maybe that can, help you kind of decipher exactly what you're experiencing. But yeah, just to throw it out there. But great questions, guys. Let's see. Let's see. Hi, Nick. Where can I purchase any of your Podgo presets? Thank you, Barry. Well, any presets from myself will be free on our custom tone. And this preset I just threw together for this presentation. But if you were to go on Line 6 custom tone, and I'm sure I can, if I were to just go to line6.com, let's take a look here. So if I just go on the website here and I go to custom tone, and this is for everyone watching, we can go on custom tone. And if we search in N Bell, I believe okay, so there we go. So if you just type in my name, N Bell, you can find all these presets. And so the closest you're going to get to what we were doing today would be this EVH preset here. And keep in mind, the Allure pack, the Allure impulse responses is what we were using. So I can go, line6.com/Allure. And if you go to the Allure website here, you can just type in your email, and within a minute or two, you'll have those 6 impulse responses delivered to your inbox. But just to recap, go to the custom tone tab on our website and type in NBell, and you'll have all my presets throughout all the years that you can download. It looks like that Randy Rhoads preset got a decent amount of likes, but I was using an impulse response on that. But yeah, so that's where you can get my presets. Again, feel free to, this video will be recorded on our Facebook, so you can always go back and kind of just follow along and build it yourself if you don't want to go on custom tone and download. So let's see here. Thank you for your input. Exceptional. Thank you so much for joining. It truly is. Yes, we are one of a kind. I must agree. There are a handful of us here, my kids and my brother, around 12 hours apart. And cheers, Nick. Appreciate. Barry, thank you so much for joining. Hope to see you on the next stream next week. I believe one of us, either Tony or Ross, will be up on Thursday. But Barry, much appreciated. Thank you for coming out. It's not too often when I see this, especially spelled this way. Okay, awesome. Glad you guys are having some good back and forth there. So everyone, thank you again so much for joining today. There's just one little tidbit I wanted to throw out there. I end every live stream with this, but lessons, Helix Skype lessons, even though we don't do them on Skype, we do them on Zoom. It could be on Skype, whatever platform you prefer. Anyhow, what you experienced today, you can experience one-on-one with one of our product specialists. It could be me, it could be Tony, it could be Ross, it could even be our newest product specialist in Canada. But anyhow, if you go to line6.com/events, you can book a 45-minute lesson with any of us product specialists completely free. And currently it's free. So who knows if that'll ever change. But with that being said, take advantage of it. And, we'd be more than happy to hop on a call with you and spend 45 minutes to really go over whatever you want to go over. Of course, as long as it's a current Line 6 product, we're there to support it. It could be Helix, it could be Metallurgy, it could be Helix Native, it could be Power Cab or Catalyst, whatever it may be. Go to this area on our website and we'll be happy to book you. So other than that, guys, thank you so much for joining today. I'm going to keep that lesson screen up just for, quick, 10, 15 seconds in case you want to jot it down. But again, thank you for joining and hope to see you guys on the next stream. I am your Line 6 product specialist, Nick Bell, and I'm signing off. Thank you guys. Much appreciated.